I am Ian Michelinis from KwaZulu-Natal, which is a province in South Africa. I'm a certified holistic management educator, and having had the practice on my own ranch and some of the mistakes I've made, I use that to teach people because I do not want them to reinvent the wheel. And you're watching Meet the Farmer TV.
This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Melli Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design. Hello, I'm Michael Clark. Welcome to Meet the Farmer TV.
I actually farm a ranch on my own with our son, and it's a family business, and we got to our ranch in 1863, our forefathers, and we've been on the same ranch ever since. We have managed to increase the size of the ranch, but having done holistic management, we found ourselves in a situation where we've actually got too much land now and not enough animals. So I spend a lot of my time traveling around the world teaching other people about holistic management, how to improve the soil, heal the land, and improve their standard of living. So it's my passion that young people should get the opportunity to be able to ranch and live off the land. Not only live off the land, but to enjoy a good standard of living. At the moment, I feel ranchers and farmers are at the bottom of the social heap, and really the rest of the world needs us, and yet we have been discarded as second-class citizens, and it's not just in America, it's throughout the world. So it's on that basis that I travel around the world telling people that it is possible to make a living off the land, but we need to change the way we manage. And to me, holistic management enables us as humans to think in a multi-dimensional way and to make decisions that are socially sound, environmentally sound, and financially sound. And it's what we call the triple bottom line. Now, the problem has been that we as humans understand anything that is linear, for instance, computers, mechanical, etc., and we've done those exceedingly well. But the minute we start dealing with aspects of the world that are multidimensional, like nature, we have run into problems and we have made some serious mistakes. And part of the problem is that science is a reductionist theory, works on a reductionist theory, and much of what science has told us is an actual fact. True does not work in nature, because nature works with holes within holes, and if you know something about the part within a hole, you know nothing about the whole. So it's on that basis that we need to start looking at holes and understanding that really the way we have treated our land, it has been overgrazed, and when I say overgrazed, this happens with set stocking, and we must understand that you can only overgraze a plant, and overgrazing is a factor of time and not numbers. So what has happened is we have overgrazed plants and we've lost all our nutritious plants, and we have found ourselves in a situation where instead of emulating the big herds of animals that used to move around our continents, where the grasslands developed over many thousands of years with the predator-prey relationship, our set stocking has reduced the situation where we then have to use the tool of fire or mow, etc. So the equation is energy in, energy out, and if money is energy and energy is money, they are totally interchangeable, and most of conventional thinking is a negative energy result, where the result is farmers are going backwards and not forwards. And yet we are told that we have improved seeds. I don't know where improved seeds come from when nature has been improving natural seeds for 1,000 or more years, and all of a sudden over a 20 or a 5-year period, a company comes up with an improved seed, but in actual fact it is not improved per se. It needs more water, it needs more fertilizer. So if we go back to the equation of energy in, energy out, we're in a negative situation and we're on a losing streak. So we need to think about what we're doing and change what we're doing.
How do we change it?
Well, I think we need to sit and watch nature a bit and understand what happened with the predator-prey relationship, and that the predators kept these big herds of bison in your country and buffalo in our country together, and any one that was sick, lame or lazy or didn't reproduce, it fell out of the herd and it was eliminated from the genetic pool. And that is why form follows function, and the function of the animal is to reproduce in the environment in which it's born and nothing else. The amount of milk it produces, etc., will all happen if you select just for form follows function. But we haven't, because we've had the ability to feed bales and do all these expensive things, and the money has ended up in the towns instead of back on the ranches or on the farms. So on that basis, it's much what I teach, that people don't need anything. In fact, the townspeople in the world need us as agriculturalists, and we deserve to take our proper place in society, and I think our turn is about to come. I have no company. I work independent, and I am Ian Michelinis and the family at home. I have a son who's back on the ranch helping me, and a daughter who's living in Johannesburg, and she does the books for the ranch. And then, of course, Pam, my wife, who's tremendous support for me. I have an email. Is Blanern, B-L-A-N, at mweb.co.za.
MWeb is the letter M, W-E-B.
Correct. .co.za.
You say Z is Z.
ZA. I happened to come over in the United States to attend the annual general meeting of Holistic Management International in Albuquerque. And I take this opportunity of coming over here to train and teach people in the United States. So I've been here for the last 2 months in numerous states, training and teaching people on the land how to lead a better life and improve the return on their investment. Certainly, the healing of the land is all about making sure that we do not lose biodiversity. And this comes about by getting litter, which is carbon, onto the soil, and in doing so preventing the sun and the wind from taking the moisture out of the soil, and also preventing rain from washing the soil into the rivers. So it's all about carbon sequestration. And I believe, I'm not quite sure where the figures came from, but if 50% of the ranchers in the world practice some form of holistic management, we could sequestrate enough carbon to get the carbon in the air back to pre-industrial era within 5 years. Now, I don't know how this was actually worked out, but having seen what has happened on my own ranch, I can see that huge amounts of carbon are now going into the soil because I no longer use the tool of fire. I use animal impact to put down the grass that is not grazed, to put it back into the soil and create an environment where I'm feeding the soil, so fertilizers aren't necessary. And what happens is that if your grass is very nutritious, your animals do well, they do not get sick, they do not get pink eye. Pink eye is a symptom of health. Flies on an animal are a symptom of health. So if you've got healthy soil, you have healthy grass and healthy animals. And that's as easy as that. You do not need to buy anything. Well, I think what has happened in the world, I'm passionate that people should be able to heal the soil and improve our environment. And I only came into this holistic management at the age of 50. And it's like walking through a door and there's a whole new world out there. Because all of a sudden I'm now seeing things that conventionally, because of the education that we have around the world and the way people are educated, you don't see all these things. Whereas holistic management has now, if you will, skinned my eyes, and I've got a whole new vision of the world, and I'm enjoying myself. Well, I think the most important thing of doing what I'm doing, it's enabled me to have more time with family and friends. And our whole family, from the 2 children traveling around the world for 7 years, are back in South Africa. And most of you in America reading the press will wonder why I even bothered to go back to South Africa, or why they went back to South Africa. But the fact is that because of holistic management, and they have bought into it totally, they understand that there is a future in our country, even though there are problems, because in actual fact there are problems throughout the world. and it's better to deal with problems that you know. And the multi-dimensional decision-making process of holistic management enables you to preempt any of the problems that might arise. So we are very happy in South Africa. One must remember, when I talk about destroying our environment, we have destroyed it with, yes, overgrazing, but in actual fact, underutilization in a brittle tending environment has created more damage and more deserts in our world today than anything else. So yes, overgrazing is a factor, but underutilization is a bigger factor. Underutilization is where no animals, and I'm talking about ruminants, go, so that what happens is there is total rest. There is more deterioration with total rest, and that is why in America today you have these huge fires, particularly in California and around the country, because the herbivores aren't there to eat up the carbon and drop it on the ground in the form of dung. And in actual fact, if we go back in history, some 100,000 years ago, 100 or 1,000 years ago, we'll see that nature developed with large herds of wild animals, and these animals actually disturbed the soil. And in disturbing the soil, they created something new. And that is what we are lacking today, because there's a certain group of the population who believe that for things to recover and for things to be good, that no animals must go in, and that's an absolute fallacy.
This is what we call the Millennium Feather Net. And this is a new design this year. This is another example of trying to increase the scale without compromising the integrity of the prototype. So what we've used in the past for this is a high-tech electric netting. It's got little stainless steel threads, filaments woven through the polyethylene, and so that keeps the chickens in and keeps coyotes and foxes and wolves and raccoons and stuff out. Comes in 150-foot pieces, so there's 3 pieces here hooked together, which gives a 1/4 acre. There's about 1,100 layers in this group. Oh, here comes Jerry. Jerry's just riding up here. And so what we've used in the past here, are hoop houses. And we have some big hoop houses out. The problem with the hoop house is that, the structural integrity of the hoop house, it's light, but it's not strong enough to build a lot of interior, vertical, spatial infrastructure. So by changing the model to this scissor truss, this is on 3-inch pipe on the bottom. It's just a skid. At the other end is a trailer, is a feed trailer that holds 1.5 tons of feed. So the feed trailer is hitched to this. So you just hook to the feed trailer with a tractor, and the whole thing just skids right along. And this enabled us to put 1,200 birds in here with half of the footprint of the hoop house for the same number of birds. And by using the vertical space with all the perch boards, it was actually more chicken friendly than the hoop structure where they had to be on the ground all the time. The eggs are a lot cleaner because the chickens are up off the ground, so they don't loiter around as much, and they clean their feet off as they come up here to lay. So the eggs are much cleaner, and you don't have to wash them or do anything with them, just put them away. So every 3 days, we move this to another spot. This is a 1/4 acre, so you can see now we've already set up for the next move. It'll be right over there. So you just open up the waste, hook up to that feed trailer, open it up, the chickens walk into the next spot, you pull this in, you close it, and you're done. And so the chickens are moving every 3 days to a fresh spot.
I've done a lot of talks over the past 5, 6, 7 years of producers, telling them how to do it. I was doing a conference in Pennsylvania, the PASA conference, Pennsylvania Association of Sustainable Agriculture, and I gave 2 talks, one on ABCs of grass-fed beef and the marketing story and how good the story is and all this stuff. And then I'm driving home to Massachusetts. As I go across the George Washington Bridge, it was like a light bulb. I was saying, you know, I'm talking to the wrong people. I'm talking to the producers. I need to talk to the consumers. So at that point, I started, there's a restaurant in Brooklyn called Applewood that they have a farmer dinner. They've done 3 of them now, where they cook a 5-course meal out of our meat, paired with wine. They charge $100 a plate. They do it on a Tuesday night. They fill the place. And in the middle of dinner, they let me get up and talk to the consumer. And people are just rabid for the truth, for the real story. And once they get it, just get out of their way. They're gonna go into their store, demand it. It's absolutely, the consumer is absolutely the key, because the consumer can pull on the rope, whereas pushing on the rope is a much harder way. You know, everybody talks about, well, we don't have slaughter capacity, we don't have distribution. All that stuff will fall into line if the consumer goes in, bangs the hand, and says, I want this. You know, a perfect example, in the book Fast Food Nation, he writes about the fact that there are no GMO potatoes. And why there are no GMO potatoes is because McDonald's did a focus group, asked people if they wanted GMO French fries. They said no. McDonald's put the word out, we're not going to buy GMO potatoes. Guess what? There are no GMO potatoes. I mean, the market power is tremendous. And the consumer, see, right now the consumer has got so many stories. They get the Joel Salatin story, they get the local story, they get the free range, they get the organic, they get this. It's totally confusing. But if they eventually learn the grass, 100% grass story, then, and the pieces of the story are no mad cow, no E. coli. The E. coli one is huge. People just don't understand. You know, front page article last couple of weeks ago in the New York Times was about E. coli and this lady that got it, and she's in a wheelchair for life and all of this. Well, Cornell did the research years ago. If you take the cattle off feed, off the grain feed, fed them hay for 5 days, at the end of this, before this harvested, 80% of the E. coli goes away, the bad kind of E. coli. If you leave them on for 2 weeks, 90-some% goes away. The fact is that the E. coli is naturally occurring, but it needs an acidic environment to proliferate. You feed grain, you create acidosis, E. coli takes off. You feed them grass like they're supposed to eat. I mean, I have bar graphs. You can see the E. coli in the grain fed, and there is a bar, but it's like you can hardly see it in the grass. So talk about a public health solution. You know, right now we're doing research on irradiation of meat. Merck, I'm sure, is trying to develop a shot that you can give cattle for E. coli, but it's so simple. You can get the E. coli out of the spinach, just take it out of the cattle. It's actually, the power of journalists and people that are out there talking to the consumer are hugely important, because the consumer needs to get the story straight. Once they do, then it's a whole different ballgame. And then the producers will be yanked along with the whole thing. So, you know, that's a critical part of the whole thing. It's the most part of the whole thing. I mean, genetics are important, the consumer is more important. Put it that way. So, well, the Rotokawa is actually the name of a stud in New Zealand that raised this set of cattle. They're Devon cattle, but this is our brand, Rotokawa, because that's the name of the stud. And last year we imported the entire herd from New Zealand, 89 animals. We flew them in on 747s, built a quarantine center in California and quarantined them for 45 days, and then moved them to my place in Massachusetts. So the entire herd is in Massachusetts now. But these Rotokawa cattle are Devon. And the Devon is an interesting breed because it's one of the breeds that, as recently as 2002, the American Livestock Breeds Conservancy listed this breed as critically rare, less than 200 registrations, very little interest. It had basically died out because of the, interest, because of the fact that the breed does not do well on a feedlot. Its crime is that it's too easy fleshing. It gets fat too fast. The feedlot doesn't want that trait, so this breed just about died out by 2002. In 2001, I started a group called the New England Livestock Alliance, trying to organize farmers and figure out consistent quality meat. We were kind of at the beginning of the grass-fed thing. Nobody had heard of grass-fed. Today, everybody's heard of grass-fed. You know, 7 or 8 years ago, the universities weren't talking about it. There weren't conferences like this, but the science was there that it was healthy, and you know, the energy inputs and everything. What we found early on is we went to a farm, a good farm in New York. The guy had beautiful grass, great producer, and we raised 6 animals, and then we killed them. And we found tremendous variability. We found some that was tough, some that was tender, some was good, some wasn't. At that point, I hooked up with my partner, Gerald Fry, and we went around and started ultrasounding cattle. And we can ultrasound a live animal and find the intermuscular fat and the tenderness. We started doing that, and we realized we could produce good quality meat by ultrasounding. But then we realized that most producers won't let us come in and cherry pick their herd, and we decided we better find the genetic prescription. What we did is in the Angus cattle, the black cattle, we found some 15–20% would not be a good experience, eating experience. But every time we saw Devon, we found the quality we were looking for. But we couldn't find the bulls that we were happy with in this country. So we went to New Zealand and we found this stud. And we imported semen. In 2003, we imported 12 females, and we started making embryos, trying to build herds around the country. And then, like I said, last year in June, or in May, Ken, the guy who was the manager of the herd in New Zealand, called me up and he said, well, he was retiring, they're turning the farm over to a young kid, 24-year-old kid who was more interested in his motorbikes than the cattle. And he asked me if I wanted the herd, and I said yes, and then we had to figure out how to move the herd. But what's exciting about these cattle, you know, we have this meat company now, I mentioned to you, Hardwick Beef. So we kill about 10 animals a week, 100% grass. I'm in Massachusetts, so the meat goes into the Boston and New York markets. 10 animals a week is a pretty small company, but we've figured out consistent quality, and we've also figured out how to make money at it. That was the key to our program, is that we figure out how to make money on the first animal we sell, and then as we expand the program, we continue to make more money. But one of the interesting things about the breed, you can see, you know, because we slaughter the animals, we know what's under the skin, we know what the fat is, we know what the tenderness is. And we have a guy that actually runs the company, Michael Gourlay is the CEO of the meat company, and he tracks the yield every single week on the cattle we slaughter. And he finds that if the cattle are sired by one of our Rotokawa Devon bulls, he gets an increased percentage of meat and in the cutout, and that increased percentage of meat is up here in the loin and the rib, the high value areas of the animal. So we actually pay our producers a premium for cattle that are bred to our bulls because we get more meat. And we pay the producer hot carcass weight, $1.85 hot carcass weight, and we give them a premium of another quarter when they're bred to our bulls. So another 25 cents to them, and we make another $300 because we get more high value meat. So we think this breed has got tremendous potential to be it has the ability to stamp its characteristics. The word is prepotency. Most people in the cattle industry, a lot of people talk about prepotency. There's very few bulls that are actually concentrated enough to be prepotent. You know, you buy a fancy bull out of the magazine with all the numbers, and 25% of his calves will look like him. 50% will be so-so, and 25% are going to be terrible. He doesn't have the power to put his stamp on all the calves. It's very hard for a bull to do that. We find that we're closer to 90-something% stamp. And Ken and I have been, this bull has about 6,000 calves in the US and Canada. This 688 has about 10,000 calves in the US and Canada. And Ken and I, the guy from New Zealand, and Ken and I have been to Canada to see the progeny of these bulls, crossbred mother cows. And we can drive along on these huge ranches in a pickup and actually pick out the calves. You know, this is what the calves look like here. But the consistency of the calves and the stamp of the calves is really pretty remarkable. And it's across all the calves that they bred. So, I mean, even Ken was pretty amazed at the bull power, the ability, the prepotency, the ability to stamp those genetics. So we think we got a real gift for the grass-fed beef industry, because at the end of the day, you can sell anything to anybody. But what the consumer eventually wants is consistent quality. And the only way to do that is have your genetics right. And it's a huge piece of the puzzle. One of the interesting stories about consistent quality, Ken McDowell has about 50 cows and he had 2,500 sheep. So he's a sheep rancher in New Zealand. And he did his breeding just like he did with the cattle, he did with the sheep. So he had a very consistent quality set of sheep. And he's been over to visit me many times, and one time when he was in Massachusetts, he said, let's go to livestock auction. So I took him up to the Northampton Cooperative Auction, and we went back in the pens, and there's all these different sheep. There's a big Suffolk sheep, these little Shetland sheep, and they're thick and thin, and he's just delighted with his camera. He's grinning, taking pictures. And when we left the auction, I said, Ken, we really should go over to Whole Foods. There's a Whole Foods right in Hadley, Massachusetts. And I said, you got to see it. It's a meat case. They sell $40,000 worth of meat through that meat case every week. Nothing's less than $4.99 a pound. You just, we'll go see it. So we go in and we're walking down the meat case, and here's a big hand-lettered sign on top of the meat case that says New Zealand lamb. So I called the butcher over. I said, is there any way you can tell me where that came from in New Zealand? The guy says, well, I don't know. So he goes out in the back. He comes back with a cardboard box. Well, guess what? It's the slaughterhouse where Ken sells his sheep in New Zealand. So he's standing in Massachusetts, perhaps looking at his sheep in the meat case. And I said to the butcher, I said, why do you have New Zealand lamb when you could have local New England lamb? He said, consistent quality. He said, we get the same loin eye, we get the same fat cover every time. And that's the name of the game. At the end of the day, the purveyor and even the consumer wants consistent quality. They don't want a thick one, they don't want a thin one, they don't want a tough one, they don't want a tender one, they want the same thing. And that's, the bulls are the key to it. And there's so few bulls that will do what needs to be done. And this particular breed is just, you can see from these cattle, it's got a propensity to get fat. That's really the only crime of this breed, is that these cattle are fat on grass. These are cows that have had calves, nursing calves, and they're fat. And that's a pretty unique trait. So that's why we went to all the trouble and expense to import the herd. But now we think it's a real asset for the grass-fed, grass-finished, meat business. Its time has come if the consumer understands. This is the thing. The consumer is key.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Meet the Farmer TV. This program is a production of Meet the Farmer TV, LLC, in association with Planet Earth Diversified, Melli Productions, and Leslie P. Jenkins Photography and Graphic Design.